What's up, Internet? You're tuning in to episode 164 of the FlipScreen Games Podcast, a weekly video game podcast where a few best buds from different nations come together to discuss the wide world of video games. I'm your host, Pete and Bessie, joined today by my very good friends and co-hosts, Mr. Steven Radford.
Hello, hello.
And Mr. Max Wright.
Howdy, howdy.
Howdy.
I'm sticking with howdy. That felt right. That felt good.
Okay.
It's very Toy Story. You know when like the
shark? Howdy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's how you should do it next time, Max.
The third howdy probably does make it, actually. Two howdies. I did feel restrained. So, okay, next week, I'm going to just all out.
Just go for it. Howdy.
Let's try. Okay, you know what?
Show for me to get a hat.
And Mr. Max Wright. No? Nothing?
Howdy.
There we go. We got a delay or something? What happened there?
I think there may be a delay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we're back. Maybe the earliest we've had to bail out of a recording and refresh, but we're good. We're back. What's up, everybody? FlipScreen Games Podcast. We're here to talk about Kojima.
Yeah, Kojima. I forgot what we were talking about with all that delay. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting one today. We got the headline just a few days ago now that Kojima and his studio Kojima Productions have purchased the rights back to Death Stranding and had a shadow drop over on Xbox. So kind of just out of nowhere, the first game, the Director's Edition, ended up on Xbox and PC. And it's going to be published by 505 Games. There's a big discount right now, 50% launch discount. So like Xbox players picking it up day and date can get it for like $20 in the States. It's timed basically like exactly 5 years after the original PS4 release.
5 years?
Isn't that crazy?
That is crazy.
Yeah. And so, I guess what people are assuming from that information, right, is that like PlayStation's exclusivity deal was, 5 years long, and that now that's
Do you
over.
not think it was indefinite though? Because like even on the Steam page for this, the director's cut still says 2020 copyright 2022 Sony Interactive Entertainment, and presumably that's going to be replaced. So my feeling was there wasn't an exclusivity agreement. It was that Sony owned the rights to this game, so they owned the exclusive publishing rights probably for console. Right. And now that Kojima's got it back, he can just put it wherever he wants, and he's opted to use the same publisher that he used for the PC version 505. And it's just like, okay, well, let's shove this wherever it works. He's on Xbox, presumably it'll be on the next generation Switch. We know it's coming to like Mac. I think we can probably see an iPhone release in the future.
Yeah, is it not already on iPhone? Am I wrong about that?
Yeah, it might be actually. I feel like
I'm pretty sure it was announced.
You can walk everywhere.
Really?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Kojima came out on stage at one of the Apple events and was
like, you're right, you did, yeah.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things that I think if it wasn't like exactly 5 years, I would say that it could be that he's just got the rights back. But I do feel like the fact that it's been 5 years, it could be that Sony just owned the rights outright, not just an exclusivity deal. They owned the rights to Death Stranding as a whole for 5 years.
And then Kojima had the option to buy it back or something?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Because he might have wanted to see where that relationship went. He might have wanted to see what other people care about. Obviously, they had a good relationship with Epic Games because I'm pretty sure when it came out, it was an Epic Games exclusive. I'm pretty sure for a little bit on PC. I might be making that up. But that was before the Director's Cut came out, I'm pretty sure, right? That was when it was just the PS4 version that was on PC.
I think that's right. Yeah. I'm a little hazy because it's like there's been so many iterations in the short 5 years, but I think that's right. And I did just confirm it is available on iOS now with 505.
How crazy is that?
Listed as the publisher
on iPhone.
Yeah, it's pretty nuts.
You need your phone plugged in at all times, probably. There's no chance you're getting like a couple of hours of battery life out of that.
It's also like 77 gigs, so it's like it's massive. Like it's taking up most of your phone.
Jesus.
But yeah, I mean,
how big are iPhones now? Like I know
you
that
can
you
get
can
up to
still get
a
60...
terabyte now.
Oh really? I know you can get a
Really?
64 gigabyte iPad still, which is crazy. Yeah,
that's wild.
I mean, you're an iPhone guy, right, Steve?
I am. Yeah, I'm still on a 12.
Just get Death Stranding for me then. Get Death Stranding.
Check it out. See how it plays.
I would try, but I tried to play that game on Steam Deck and I couldn't because it bored me to tears. So I don't think I will make it through on my phone, which is riddled with distractions. I could just be like, oh, I'm bored of Death Stranding. I'm going to go see what's on Instagram, or I'll scroll through Blue Sky.
Yeah.
So I'm just not gonna get through it. But this has a couple of interesting questions for me. Like, where does this leave Death Stranding 2? Is the number one question. And number two is, like, is this the first Decima engine game on another console, on another platform? Is it going to?
Because that's the Sony proprietary.
It's a Sony proprietary engine. Are they going to continue to kind of license, or what's going to happen?
Did it have to be ported? I guess not. I guess it's just it runs on that architecture, really. But yeah, that's really interesting. I hadn't considered that.
Which means then that Horizon would probably just work on Xbox if they wanted to release it.
Oh yeah, of course it would.
Yeah, where Until Dawn is on PC. That's a Decima
Decima
game.
had been ported to PC. Death Stranding was the first one. We then saw Horizon come over. We've got Until Dawn. There's a bunch of games in that engine on PC. But this is the first one, to my knowledge, that's made it to a competing console.
Yeah, definitely.
It wouldn't surprise me if Sony wanted to, if Sony did Horizon on Xbox. They're putting the Horizon Lego game everywhere, including Switch. Horizon seems to be, I've said this to you before, Pete, about it being like an industry plant kind of game where Herman Hulse is his baby. He's like, put it front and center. I don't care. Let's give it a Lego game, whatever. It would make sense if they were ever going to breach that gap onto Xbox themselves, not through like this Death Stranding has. It would be Horizon. That just seems like they're, I don't know, almost like most accessible, most widest reaching style of game, other than like Spider-Man, maybe. I feel like Spider-Man actually would be the perfect game for that. But yeah,
Spider-Man I think would be if you were going to pick anything, just because it's attached to an IP,
Spider-Man.
right? Yeah, it's like Spider-Man's one of the most recognizable characters in the Western canon, right? I think I don't personally. I don't think you'll see that happen. I've been wrong before about plenty of these things. I didn't think they would bring all these games to PC. I never would have guessed Lego Horizon would have existed, let alone been multi-platform. But I have to imagine that Lego Horizon being multi-platform has more to do with it's similar to like the reason that MLB The Show is on Xbox, right? Is like it has less to do with PlayStation and more to do with Major League Baseball being like, if you want to keep the rights.
That one is, but I don't know about the Lego one, because they're making that one in house. It's like, it's not a TT Games John. It's their own kind of thing from what I remember.
I don't think that's right. You keep going.
Regardless, I don't think they would have had to release it on another. I don't think they would have had to release it on another platform. I think they could have just opted and gone, we're going to keep this exclusive, because otherwise, I feel like they would have had to release it on Xbox as well. But to the fact that they've only released it on Switch, I think they've just seen a business decision there, which harkens back to what the CFO was saying, which is we've got to make more money. And the way we make more money is releasing games on other platforms. I think they still see Xbox as a threat. They don't want to follow suit with what Xbox is doing and releasing games on PlayStation, because they don't really need to. But releasing it on the Switch doesn't feel like the Switch is really kind of eating up any of PlayStation's market share.
Yeah, it's not a direct competitor, right? It's like the same thing like when we saw years ago Xbox start bringing games to Switch, and it's like, okay, like it makes sense, right? Like it's like they're not one-to-one competitors the way that I think Sony and Xbox kind of are, right? And even that less so than they used to be, but you are correct, by the way. It is made by Guerrilla with support by Studio Gobo, with Lego Group overseeing.
Who?
Not familiar.
Yeah, right. No, never. I thought you were talking about Decima Engine. Sorry. Do we? The thing is, we haven't seen the industry in the shape that it's in right now for a long time. Of like, closing things down, whole teams disappearing, mass layoffs.
That part's the same.
Games. Yeah. Games failing to meet expectations. Gamers, opting to play games that came out 5 years ago, like free to play games. New gamers not being bought into AAA games where they have been. Like, the industry is rocky, it's shaking. I wonder if the conversations in all these boardrooms are, we need a bigger audience. How are we going to do this?
Yeah, it has to be. It has to be.
The obvious leap was PC, but now, well, there are people on Xbox that,
Yeah, I mean,
I think that's what Hiroki Totoki was saying before. It was like, we've only got a finite number of gamers on PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5. Releasing on PC made sense because it's kind of they're a completely separate audience that may not even buy a console, and we can sell our games again and make a profit there. Selling the same games on Switch, I think makes sense for PlayStation and Xbox to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I
One
mean,
day you'll say Hiroki Totoki and I won't laugh, but today
it is really great that his name rhymes. There is the what is it, 2 weeks ago, I guess now, right? When we were talking about the comments that Sean Layden was making at Gamescom Asia. And, I think that, yeah, you're definitely right, where, like, I'm sure that's kind of the conversation that's going on in a lot of these boardrooms is, like, how do you expand the player base? How do you, like, monetize games more? And I don't know. It's interesting because I think, like, to your point, Max, I think there is this kind of, like, I think on some level there is this kind of, like, cultural shift in terms of, like, younger gamers favoring certain kinds of games and this and that. But it's also, like, I think some of it is like self-inflicted, like, is this kind of, like, the end result of like unfettered capitalism, not to jump on a soapbox, but it's like, we've talked a lot about how during the pandemic, there was, this massive amount of spending on video games, and that there was, like, this huge, influx of cash. And, I don't know that players are less interested in traditional single player AAA games. There was a survey that we almost talked about a few weeks ago that showed that it's pretty 50-50 in terms of what people actually want. And I think some of that comes down to, like, unrealistic expectation, in terms of, like, how much these games are going to perform or how much is reasonable for them to perform. Because, I think we talk about it. I think, like, when we get in these conversations about single player and, budgets and all this stuff, we often leave Nintendo out of that conversation and we act like they're kind of, like, on their own island, but it's like, they're not, right? Like, it's like they have the most successful console on the market right now. Almost every game they put out is single player, and most of them sell a lot of copies, right? Like, it's like, even, like, they're more like budget titles, right? That, like, they spend less money to produce and they spend less time to develop. Like the new Zelda game that just came out, right? Like, it didn't set the world on fire. It sold 2 million copies almost. It's sold like 1.5 million copies in, like, a few weeks. It's like, that's nothing to sneeze at for a game that probably cost a fraction of what it costs to make Spider-Man, but it, like, cost $10 less. I think some of that comes down to, like, there being these kind of unrealistic expectations. And to take it back to the Death Stranding of it all, I think that, like, Kojima putting it out at $20 at launch as, like, a launch discount to be like, hey, like, yeah, this is new to this console, but it's a 5-year-old game at this point. It's like, you don't want to spend full price on a game like that. And I think you see a lot of games step on that rake when they come to another platform, and it's like, it's full price.
Absolutely.
And I think, like, seeing creative positioning like this and seeing, like, a big, like, this is a big AAA game, right? That, like, needed the backing of PlayStation to succeed. But now that, they have, some of that, it reminds me of, like, what we saw with Hitman a couple years ago, or, like, what we just saw with Remedy buying back, Alan Wake and everything, or Control, whichever one it was. And it's like,
Control.
That, I don't know, that, like, level of AAA developer, I think is something that we've kind of seen fall away, and I would love to see more of those kind of, like, build that, strength and that power again to be able to be independent and own a handful of IP that they control and that they can invest and reinvest, and, when they make this movie or whatever, right? Like, that'll increase the sales of the game, ideally the same way that Fallout did, and that'll fund the next game. And, it's like being able to, like, creatively monetize those kinds of experiences, and sometimes that's just as smart as launching it on another platform at a discount, right? But yeah, I think it's encouraging to see something like this, and it's like, yeah, like obviously it's Kojima, and you know, not everybody's Kojima, but like Remedy's not Kojima, right? Like, what's the Hitman studio? I can't think of their name, Steve.
IO,
right? IO is not. They don't have a Kojima, and they were able to, you know, go independent.
IO's kind of like a bit of a different situation. It was, we're gonna shut the studio down and you're done, and they were just like, okay, well, let's buy it then instead.
Yeah, can we leave and take our IP?
Yeah, whereas in this case, I feel like this is a real win for, you know, fighting against capitalism, Pete. It's like an artist buying back their art and being able to take control of it and do what they want with it, in the same way that we even saw with like Stardew Valley.
Totally.
Like buying that back from Chucklefish, and like now I can do what I want. I can publish it myself. I can make these decisions and kind of hire who I want to help out and stuff. And I own and retain all of the profits from it. And now I can have creative control over it again.
Funnily enough, you mentioned a minute ago, just because I have been thinking about this the whole time. You said that about Remedy buying the rights to Control back. They bought them back from 505 as well. So I wonder if Kojima and I wonder if 505's like, well, we need something. We're just fucking giving away Control. Let's keep working on Death Stranding.
But I think like that's so interesting to me, because it's like that, you know, we're jumping around a little bit, but this is another story that we may or may not discuss at length. We'll see where we go. But if we want to jump into it a little bit now, I was so disappointed to see the news that Private Division, you know, it was getting sold off and everything, because I think like publishers like Private Division, or like what you're seeing 505 do here, it's like I would love to see more of that. And like that's kind of what Chucklefish was for Stardew, right? Like it's like in the early days of that game, like they needed a publishing partner. They, you know, it was one person operation. He needed help to, you know, start marketing the game and getting it, you know, press attention.
Well, they helped with the ports as well, to the console ports, and also the multiplayer stuff.
All those things that like ended up getting the game to kind of like where it needed to be the institution that it is. And then it's like, all right, cool. Like, you know, like the game has outgrown this relationship. The publisher made money on it while they were together. Now they're able to move on and be independent. And, you know, I think I would love to see more stuff like that. Cause like, you know, the IO situation, right? Like, to your point, that was, I guess, born out of a different kind of setup, but like, you know, I mean, there are a lot of stories where that happens and the studio doesn't get that opportunity, and like the publisher like sold them the rights back, right? Like it's like Square could have easily been like, nah, it's like it's better for us to own Hitman, you know, and it's like we're just gonna close the studio down, right? Because it's like so many of these, you know, we've talked about that with like Microsoft and stuff, right? It's like EA was super guilty of this during their worst period of like buying a studio, owning their IP, closing them down, and then just like sitting on the IP because it's valuable to own IP, but not do anything with it, apparently.
I mean, that's Embracer Group. That is exactly what Embracer Group.
Embracer Group.
Sure, yeah. And we see how that's working out. So, like, I would love to see more studios that have, like, you know, it's like almost like almost like a patronage kind of system, like, but like obviously like they're getting a financial return, but it's like this kind of like transactional thing, right? Where it's like, we're going to work with you and support you. It's almost like hiring like a PR firm or something like that, like Pop Agenda or like one of those other like smaller teams that like helps you market your indie game and like helps you get it off the ground, but doesn't have any ownership stake in it. But like, obviously it's a little bit different. It's like you have an ownership stake until you have the option to buy it out. I hope that becomes a standard for these kind of agreements, you know, because it's like, I could see that being like, you know, like how great would it be if From Software could have like had the option to buy back Dark Souls at some point, or like,
or Bloodborne, right?
Bloodborne,
yeah,
I would absolutely adore it if Sony were like, well, we need some money. Do you want to buy Bloodborne off us, please?
Right.
FromSoft.
And it's like you see a lot of studios that have that problem. Like, obviously, like, you know, I've talked about how I'm a fan of Life is Strange, right? And it's like Don't Nod, the studio that originally made Life is Strange. You know, they went to Square Enix because they were like on the brink of shutting down, and they like, you know, like sold the rights to what would become their most popular and you know, this franchise they're still most associated with, but they don't own it, and now another studio's working on it because they want it to go independent. And it would be nice to have the opportunity for, you know, maybe they wouldn't have, right? Maybe they would have wanted to move on anyway, but if they owned the IP, all the sales that it continues to generate would be funding their next game, not, well, we got our payday from that and that's it, right? Like Square makes all the money now. You'd love to see more studios, like I think, have that baked into their contract where there's an option after a certain amount of time to like purchase the name back, purchase the IP back, and own publishing rights for yourself, you know, and then make a partnership with somebody like a 505.
Do you remember like the Toys for Bob thing?
Yes.
Yeah, like that was what happened with them, right? Like they got spun off instead of getting closed down.
Yeah, but that was really weird because like they're basically going to be working on the same games, but they are now an independent studio that is seemingly working on with Microsoft on a new Spyro game that, you know, the Spyro trilogy just came to Game Pass this week, and they're clearly like wanting to do something with the IP. So it's like that was a really weird scenario that rather than shutting them down, it's just like, well, you kind of keep going and doing what you want, and we'll just give you some cash and hire you.
Yeah.
I feel like there's more to that story. Like either they wanted to go independent and Xbox was just like, fine, right? Like we're not going to like force you to stay here if you want to be in control of your own destiny, and, you know, we'll let you work on the IP that we want to develop anyway. Or maybe it is like an IO thing where they were like, hey, we don't need 3 studios that exist in the same niche. You guys are on the chopping block. But I don't know. I kind of don't think that's what happened. And I think that like when you look at it from Xbox's perspective, I think it's only a positive thing because owning a studio is very expensive, and like paying everyone's salaries and making sure that you're managing the team. Like they already have a problem managing productions, right? Like that's been shown over the last generation that like they don't really have a good handle on all of these studios that they own, and it seems like these games are kind of getting made in a silo, and then they come out and they're surprised that they're not meeting expectations. So like if a studio like that goes independent, and then now they're in charge of managing the studio and paying everyone's salaries, and if people get laid off, it's not Xbox's fault. If the game doesn't succeed, it's not Xbox's fault. They're just the publisher, right? And like I'm not surprised especially if Toys for Bob was like, hey, we want to go independent, but then we want to develop games for you exclusively. Or, you know, I guess maybe they'll be multi-platform, who knows? But I
think everything that Xbox puts out these days is going to be multi-platform.
I guess, right? Like, I guess that remains to be seen, because it's like, it's increasingly like, where is the line? Like, what?
I don't think there will be a line soon.
Probably
really
not,
don't.
right? Like, I mean, it seems that way anyway. So it's like, I think when you think about it that way, it's like, what does Xbox stand to gain by owning that studio rather than just paying them to make games, right? Like,
true, yeah. I mean, I wonder if this, like, maybe PlayStation will look at this Death Stranding stuff and be like, well, maybe we could see how well Death Stranding does across the fence, you know, and maybe we use that as like a bit of an acid test to say, well, do we want to do this with some of our older games? You know, do we want to sell you God of War for the 3rd time? You got it on PlayStation, you got it on PC, and now you can buy it on Xbox.
I don't know. I mean,
I'm
like,
probably charge you full whack for it.
I think to that point, right? Like, as much as I don't think that's gonna happen, just because I guess maybe I'm old and I'm stuck in an old way of thinking. Because I do think PlayStation looks at Xbox as their competitor, whether Xbox does or not. But to your point, it's like they're so far out in front and Xbox is not catching up. So it's like, are you really hurting anything by making those games available on other, like, probably not. So maybe that's the mentality, is like, you do have like this level of like really long exclusivity where it's like, yeah, this game's like 5 years old now, right? If you didn't buy a PlayStation to play it, you're probably not going to buy a PlayStation to play it. So play it on Xbox, right? And like, maybe that is the mentality now. That said, though, you mentioned this earlier, and I think it got a little far away from me, about like what happens with Death Stranding 2. That's Sony published again. And it's going to be a PlayStation 5 exclusive for 2025. So I wonder if it's a similar thing where it's just like, hey, like it's exclusive for 5 years and then you can buy it back. And well, yeah, I'm sure it'll come to PC.
Is it going to be PC day and date, or
No.
are we going to be looking at like the 1 year thing, or is this now going to change now that they own Death Stranding? Is this going to change?
As of right now, it seems as if exclusive PS5 2025. My guess is it comes to PC the following year, just like the original did. Because why wouldn't it, right? But yeah, my guess is that it'll probably stay exclusive for at least, a couple years or whatever, because I think that seems to increasingly be a part of Sony's strategy, is to, not that it wasn't always, right? Like that was like the deal with Persona. That was the deal with, Bloodborne, right? Where they do have games that they partner with. I guess Bloodborne's actually a little different because it never came to other consoles. But like Persona was like we paid to make this console exclusive, and then eventually that runs out and it comes everywhere, right? But like you associate it with PlayStation first. For many years, the only place you could play it on was PlayStation. So I think like, in their mind, right, like you're shoring up, making sure that you have attractive, unique things for your audience in the moment, and then once that game's moments pass and it's kind of no longer relevant whether or not it's an exclusive, that's when that's when it comes to other places, because it's like, yeah, like Persona 5 being on Xbox and Switch and PC and everything now doesn't change the fact that it was a console-defining game last generation, And I think that's probably how they look at it, right? Is like,
but is Persona 6 going to be like? Are we going to see a similar thing there, or if that's done, is it going to be the other way around because Xbox was given so much cash to Sega this time around?
Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if it flipped and the next one was Xbox exclusive at launch, because to your point, like they seem to have gotten in bed with Sega and have a pretty close relationship with them. And I think also it's just like it's smart for like studios that are not tied to one platform to play both sides and get exclusive money from whoever's willing to give it, right? We've been talking about Kojima. He's making a game for Xbox right now, right? He's making that game, what is it? OD?
OD
is the and that was the one that he came out with.
It was the Game Awards, I think, wasn't it?
Game Awards, yeah. And Get Out. I can't think of his name.
Oh, Jordan Peele.
Jordan Peele.
Thank you. Yeah.
Hunter Schafer. Who else was in it? No, not Sadie Sink. It's the girl from It the first It.
Yeah. She
was played by Jessica Chastain in the second one, but it was, I don't know.
I can't think of her name, but I remember who you're talking about. But yeah, it's like that game is he's working on with Xbox, right? So it's like, like if you're Kojima, right, or if you're somebody with that level of cachet, it's like, why wouldn't you want to do that, right? It's like the same thing with like like a couple years ago, right, when it was like, oh, like Marvel Studios is starting to hand out licenses, and it's like PlayStation's going to get to make a Spider-Man game and a Wolverine game, and Nintendo's going to have what was it? Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3 is an exclusive only on that console. And it's like, it's like you want to just like play nice with everybody, right? It's like, he's working on Death Stranding 2 for PlayStation. He's working on OD for Xbox. And it's like probably in the time that he's doing pre-production on one, we're moving into post-production on the other. That one comes out, then he can shift to promoting that one. By the time that game cycle's over, it's been 5 years. He can bring Death Stranding 2 to Xbox. Another 5 years, OD comes to PlayStation, and
I think OD's coming to PlayStation way sooner than that. I don't think that comes exclusive at all anymore.
I don't know. I genuinely am not. And not because
But he was talking about some like, oh, we're using the cloud and this could only be done with Xbox, and like we're using the power of Azure and this, that, and the other. So it's like, all sorts of stuff.
I don't know what to make of like how Xbox is going to handle it moving forward, because I totally hear what you're saying. It's not like it's not the same way I feel about PlayStation, where I'm like, they have a strategy and I think there's certain echelons or whatever. The reason I say maybe is because I feel like I have such a poor handle on what Xbox's actual strategy is, because, they had we're going to put these 3 games and we're going to see how it goes, and these games won't be, but now they are. And it's just like, I could see them continuing to pick and choose and be like, oh, this is a big game and we think it's going to have a splash, so we want to put it behind the garden and try to entice you over to our side of the fence like they did with Starfield. If it's like something more traditional.
Oh, yeah, if there's another Fallout or an Elder Scrolls or a Halo.
But like, and I could see that maybe it's a year, maybe it's 2 years, whatever, but I could see them doing that still. Whereas like something like Indiana Jones, it's like, it's an IP, you want to maximize sales, you want to get it in front of anybody that wants to play it. That makes sense to me, right? The smaller indie games that are more niche, you want to get that in front of as many people as will play it. That makes sense to me. Why kneecap it? Whereas something like Starfield or whatever, right? Like Fallout, to your point, those are games that like historically have a longer tail, right? So it's like, even if, you know, like people will ideally still be playing that game 10 years from now or 5 years from now or whatever. So like you could put out a definitive version 2 or 3 years later on PlayStation and probably have roughly the same impact, but also, you know, have Starfield hit all those really big benchmarks that it hit, right? Like it like increased subscriptions of Game Pass the most that it ever happened and little things like that, right? So I could see that being the case, where if it's a game that they feel is attractive enough that they can entice you with it.
Yeah.
Then
maybe the new psycho horror from like, you know, Kojima is tasty enough for people to pick up an Xbox.
I think it is, right? And it's one of those things where it's like, you know, if you put it out 2 years later on PlayStation and nobody was able to play it on Xbox, and like they didn't jump over, it'll still be a big event 2 years later because it's the new Kojima game and you haven't played it.
I mean, just look at like Sea of Thieves. That was out for like fucking ever, and it became #1 on the charts in PlayStation.
Look at any PC release. It's people get jazzed up. Fucking Red Dead Redemption, the first Red Dead Redemption is what, 10 years old at this point.
10 years old.
It just released for $50 and it's done very well.
Oh, by the way, it's a lot older than 10 years old. I'm just doing the math. I was like, yeah, that game was like 6 years old 10 years ago.
Oh, shit.
It's pretty fucking old. And yeah, but to your point, it's an event though, right? Because it's a big, it's a game that's important enough. And I could see that being the metric that Xbox is judging against. If it's like, you know, something that is like really mass market or really not mass market, maybe you cast a wide net. But for something that's like, you know, motivates the hardcore folks, and maybe they'll pick up an Xbox Series S to play it 2 years earlier. Could see that. But I don't know. Maybe they have just accepted that doesn't work because it doesn't, and it hasn't for them. Not in the way they wanted it to anyway, right?
No, but I'm also of the ideology that next year we see some kind of handheld from Xbox, you know, or the year after we see some kind of handheld from Xbox that maybe nudges things in their favor a little bit, because people like handhelds. They like that form factor, like taking games on the go. You tie that in with a Game Pass subscription that includes, you know, your favorite games, not only from Xbox, but now also from Activision, and you've got the new Call of Duty that's on there day and day and things like that, then I think that maybe could nudge things in the direction of Xbox and away from PlayStation, which, you know, has not had a great year this year, but even still, you can't really say Xbox has either.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see, and selfishly, because it's one of my predictions, I'm interested to see how we feel by the end of the year when like Indiana Jones is like fresh in everybody's mind. Like if that game really hits, is that going to be like like clearly they beat PlayStation this year because PlayStation had, you know, a few small hits, but like, you know, I'm not small. Helldivers 2 was a big deal, but it was at the beginning of the year. Memories are short. It had problems later on. I think it had a little bit of that Diablo effect where it was really hot and then it took a couple chinks in the armor.
Well, the big swing and a miss of you need a PlayStation account, and then we're going to delist it from 30 countries didn't really help.
More than
that.
100 and something countries.
Yeah,
it was mental.
And then there was, you know, there were some complaints about like, you know, the cycle after a while and needing more, you know, whatever. So like that game was a huge deal. I think it will still get a lot of flowers at the end of the year that it deserves, but I also wonder if we have a big AAA prestige game that is excellent and is like what people want out of that kind of game, from an IP that at least older people have nostalgia for. Yeah, I wonder I wonder if by the end of that marketing cycle, we're like, oh, not a bad year for Xbox. That was pretty good.
That's if they do an out marketing cycle this time around, because they didn't for Hellblade 2.
Yeah, that's true. Weird. I forgot that game came out this year, which is insane considering how long we waited for it and how much they talked about it. And then it came out and it feels like they just kind of let it die. And like,
I was so jazzed for that game, but within half an hour, I was like, okay, and then never touched it again. And I just don't feel like I was able to get excited for that to sort of pull me in any way.
Yeah. It's a shame. It really is a shame.
It is a shame. Yeah.
But again, I think when you compare it to like what Sony's had this year, I mean, it's like Astrobot is kind of like that's the crowning achievement, and that game is insanely good. It's one of my games of the year. It's also pretty niche, so it's like.
But that, I think, combined with Helldivers, is a lot more than Xbox has going on at the moment. I know
I agree.
The absolute face plant that was Concord didn't really help them out.
No. But I guess to that point, right, it's like I think it really comes down to like how does Indiana Jones land, right? Because if it lands and it's like hard 9s, hard 10, which is like it's the team that made Wolfenstein, that's totally possible, right? Like one of the most beloved
games know what they're doing.
Yeah, and it's a it's easier to make a game in a well-established IP that's good, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's like, I mean, because it's like, to me, it's like, and I'm biased because I'm a Spider-Man fan, but like when it was like Insomniac's making a Spider-Man game, I was like, bet, like that's going to be game of the year.
But how many bad Spider-Man games have come before that? How many bad, like, licensed games with IP have you played? Like, there's so many. Like,
but they weren't made by Insomniac. That's the difference, right? It's like, it's Insomniac. It's not fucking Activision. It's like, it's Insomniac.
Activision made some great games.
They made some great Spider-Man games. They weren't as good as Insomniac's.
They made Toy Story 2 on the PlayStation.
They did make that game.
I'm okay for that. I'm okay with them for that.
But point being, right? It's like it's Machine Games, right? Yeah. Like like Machine Games makes bangers, and it's like they have very few misses to their name, and the idea that like this is gonna be bad, I think is.
They're pretty good at making games where you beat up Nazis, and that's what Indiana Jones is really good at doing too.
Yeah,
right?
Beloved, well-loved franchise Indiana Jones has had more misses than Machine Games have had with their games.
I would say that's right.
Oh God, yeah. I just pretend that the Crystal Skull didn't come out.
Forget the Crystal Skull. Okay. The new one is even worse. I didn't see it either, but I mean, like, I've seen that opinion of like you didn't like Crystal Skull. It's like, I'd watch him climb in that refrigerator and get exploded by a nuke anytime compared to that,
Oh yeah, that was in
Crystal Skull.
Was that Indiana Jones?
It was, yeah. Not a good movie. So I don't know. Point being, it remains to be seen. I think, though, there's a very good chance that narrative changes very quickly when that game is, like, everyone's currently playing it while they're talking about Game of the Year. But we'll see, We thought that with a couple other Xbox releases that didn't quite pan out, so we shall see. Well, that's what we're going to wrap it for today, folks. Let us know what you think about everything we talked about today. Are you excited for Death Stranding 2? Are you going to play Death Stranding on Xbox? Are you excited for OD? Needs a better name, not going to lie. And how are you feeling about?
Well, it was originally called Overdose, so
I don't think that's...
OD is maybe a little touch better.
I think they're both pretty bad. Not gonna lie to you, Kojima. Metal Gear, Death Stranding, good names. OD, you could do better.
Death Stranding's a good name.
Yeah, I think so.
All right, we'll talk about that next week.
It's not a good game, but maybe it's a good name.
It's like it's word salad-y. I'm not gonna lie about that, but it doesn't mean anything. But like, it sounds like a thing. You're like Death Stranding. Yeah, that sounds like a title.
Like Horizon Zero Dawn. Those are 3 words.
They're just words, right? Yeah. And that's not a very good
Also,
title.
why did the first game in the series need a subheading? I'm not making this point again.
Like Horizon Zero Dawn. Yeah.
Let's wrap up.
Horizon 1 Dawn.
Yeah.
Anyway, let us know what you think. If you have any thoughts on Xbox's chances for Game of the Year, any of that kind of stuff. We talked about a lot today. If you have thoughts on any of it, you can write in and get your thoughts right on the air. You can write in with your own questions. You can just write in and say, hey, keep the conversation rolling. You can do all that and much more over at flipscreen.games. That's our website where you will find links to all the places we are all over the great, glorious, and disgusting internet. However you choose to get involved, we thank you for joining us. We thank you for being a member of the community. And go check out our sister shows, Nintendo Noise and the Steam Deck podcast. They're over there too. We have had some really good episodes lately on both shows. I've been very proud of the output, so make sure you go and check them out. If you enjoy this show, you'll enjoy them too. So, boys, good work today. We made it.
We fought. We really had to fight for this to work.
A lot of technical issues today, but we kept the flow. I'm proud of us for that, all right?
Yeah.
So, for the crew, I've been Pete, he's been Steve, he's been Max. We'll see you next week.